Thanks, Anthony, our guest, for being here today and for being a G Suite customer, a Google Cloud customer, and a partner of ours.
One of my favorite products ever is G Suite. I use it to run my whole life.
Not
a joke. You didn't even put me onto this.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But before we dive into the history of Squarespace, because it's a pretty interesting founding story, can you give us the elevator pitch on what Squarespace is? I mean, I think a lot of us think of it as a website building tool, but it's a lot more than that today.
Yeah, so Squarespace, it really started as a website building tool. It started, with me in my dorm room in 2003, wanting to make a website for myself. I was pretty upset with a lot of what was out there. I wanted something that was all-in-one and really design-oriented, and so I started building Squarespace for myself. And that tool has really grown up over the past, 16 or so years into not just something that helps people make a website, but helps people transact online, whether they're selling physical products or they're booking appointments, and actually helps them market themselves as well. We launched an email marketing product earlier this year, and we had some acquisitions recently which help people make Instagram stories.
Great. So talk to me about the early years. I mean, you were a bit unique. You were sole founder of the company. I think you started in your dorm room at the University of Maryland.
One of those stories.
So tell us about some of those early years.
Yeah, so my background is engineering. I've been a programmer since I was 14, 15, and I've always had a really big interest in design. And so I actually was able to, back when I had this problem for myself, I started programming Squarespace from my dorm room. And I launched it in January of 2004. And actually, another Google product, AdWords, is why I was able to get the business off the ground. So I started, I borrowed $30,000 from my dad to buy the initial servers and set them up. And then with some of the leftover money, after I put it online and realized that nobody was showing up on my website, started buying Google AdWords. And so I started buying $100 in AdWords, $200 in AdWords. And originally in those early days, it was really centered around keywords like blogging, which meant DIY publishing. The AdWords on Build a Website were taken up by big competitors that were I couldn't bid against them, and the only one I was bidding against really on blogging was Google, because you guys had Blogger, which was fun. Yeah, so I couldn't outbid you, but I was able to be in second place for a while, and that was enough to get some traction, and so yeah.
That's great. Do you remember when you launched the product? I'm sure it was pretty exciting to get your first couple customers to sign up for the service. Do you remember who they were? Are there any specific examples that stand out?
I should probably have some better memories of that. I think some were like my friends. And then there were like, it was really bloggers. It was people who were experimenting with the medium of blogging. A lot of them were more business oriented in nature. And so it's the early adopters of the blogging medium.
Got it. And so as a sole founder, I imagine it was pretty tough and pretty lonely at first.
Yeah.
Was there a point when you realized, like, what have I gotten myself into? This is like a real thing now?
Yeah, I think, for the first year of it, a lot of what was happening was my parents were asking me when I was going to, apply for jobs after college. And actually, Google was one opportunity that I had. And so they were like, what are you doing? Like, what's this thing you're doing? It's not going to be, just take the good job. Like, you're being crazy. And the first year, I think I made, in subscription revenue, 50 grand. And they were like, okay, like, that's something. And then the next year it's like around 200, and they're like, okay, you're fine. And so that allowed me to dodge their standard narrative of, going and getting the job I was supposed to get.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, in the early days, it was really tough. I mean, I would do everything from the Google AdWords to the marketing copy to the web application to the server infrastructure, which was actually something that had plagued me for many, many years into Squarespace, just being kind of on call and having to deal with that. Very, very stressful. But now we're lucky enough to have really a fantastic team that's doing every one of those things better than I could have ever done myself. So
yeah. Now, were you going to class during this time? Or you?
I actually I did a 5th year in college. I kind of intentionally dragged it out so I wouldn't have to deal with that job question.
Okay.
So I went and had 2 classes for a year.
Okay.
And did this. So,
nice.
Yes.
Nice. So the name Squarespace, pretty clever. Where did you come up with that?
So I wanted something where I could buy the .com, .net, and .org. And it was I didn't have any money, so it was just I needed to buy it for $20 or whatever it was back then from Network Solutions or GoDaddy. No, I bought it at Enum, not GoDaddy. that would have been bad. That's a competitor. So I wanted the combat.org, and I wanted something that had no Google search results. So when I Googled Squarespace back then, there was nothing. I thought it was interesting because it was like, monitors were more squarish. They were rectangles, but, rectangle space didn't sound as good. And so, it's like your space online. And so Squarespace worked, and I figured the logo would be something like a square. I could draw that. And now we, of course, have a logo I can't even draw from memory. So that's how that worked.
Okay, great. And then at some point you reached a scale where you decided you needed to relocate the company, and you picked New York City, which a lot of entrepreneurs head west to the Bay Area, but you came up to New York. So just tell us why you chose New York and what it's been like to be here and grow the company in New York.
Yeah, so I moved to New York in 2006. I moved here alone. There were no other Squarespace employees that were full-time when I moved here. I think I had 2 contractors at the time. And I had just been always attracted to the energy of New York, and it just like the design that's here and everything else. I grew up in Northern Maryland, and Northern Maryland's great. It's very, very pretty, but it doesn't exactly have the same energy of New York City. And so always wanted to be here, moved here by myself, and it ended up being a great home for Squarespace because really the amount of creativity here and the amount of culture and design and art, it's just really unparalleled, and it's something great. The negative, of course, of moving it here back then was that it didn't have, New York didn't have the engineering culture that it has today. I mean, I don't think there was a Google office. There was no Google office here back then.
Sales office early on, and then became an engineering office over time.
Yeah, like 10 years. This is like 13 years ago. So it was a little harder to find engineers. It was really hard to find infrastructure engineers. There were certain disciplines that just weren't here. And so what's been great is that over time, New York has really evolved. I mean, I think it's a great thing that companies like Google have real engineering offices here, Facebook, Amazon, Shopify, all these other companies. So it's been good for them and good for us.
Great. And you now have over 1,000 employees at Squarespace, mostly here in New York.
Yep.
So how have you managed that growth, going from 1 to 1,000? Any lessons to share about hypergrowth?
Easy. It's just so easy. I don't know where to even begin. No. Look, I think that the things you do at every single stage are slightly different. I mean, what you're doing from 1 to 15 and 15 to 100, and these are just rough ranges, all the way up to right now are very different. I think the 2 things that are really important for us right now is you've really got to have a certain quality of leader in the organization to be able to manage at this scale, and a certain level of executive that has high EQ and high empathy and high communication skills, but also can go deep on something when you need it. And then also you just have to have a really good communication structure. And that is frankly less important when you're 10 people and you can all just kind of agree on what to do and go. When you're 1,000 people, and you guys are in a company that's many thousands more, it's really hard to create alignment, and you have to work on it every day. We don't always get this. We're not always perfect at this, but it's something we definitely focus on and try and do.
Yeah. So what's your technique? What communication structure do you use to keep the company aligned and moving in the same direction?
It's evolved over time. I mean, we do all hands. We set 5 major goals for the company every year. We have sub goals that ladder into those. A couple of our groups use OKRs. There's KPIs around those goals. Yeah, I mean, it's some basic stuff like that.
Okay. And in terms of culture, I know culture's been an important part of Squarespace. You've been very intentional about the values of the company, and I was looking at some of the values on your website online. Tell us about that. Like, where have you focused the culture? How would you characterize it? What have been the keys to success there?
Yeah, I think the part of Squarespace that's really great is that we actually have a really strong both design culture and an engineering culture, and a really deep appreciation for product. And so I think just making sure that those 2 things are able to be at the top of their game discipline-wise within the company. We bring those together, and we bring product and engineering design into the beginning of every product we do. I think has been really important. I think we were talking earlier too, you were talking about our values, and one of them was just to be your own customer. And that's something we believe in. Our front site is built on Squarespace. Our blogs are built on Squarespace. A lot of our competitors actually don't even do things like that. They don't actually build their own site on their CMS. Some do, but not all. And so that's been really, really important for us. And it flows through even to things like, and we were talking about earlier, the partnership with G Suite. We wanted to offer something to our customers that we used ourselves and we believed in. We've been a customer for a long time. And so we just wanted to again, be your own customer, be best in class and use the tools and give people what you would use.
Yeah, that's great. So as the company scaled, I mean, how has your time evolved? Like, what do you spend your time doing every day? Because you've hired a really talented leadership team. I'm sure you've delegated a lot of responsibility. So where do you think your time is best spent?
Yeah, I mean, I joke because my background's engineering and with an appreciation for design. I used to design user interfaces. And now I joke that I'm a HR and comms person, which is not untrue. So I spend a lot of time with my senior team around what we're communicating, who's in what role, how are we doing, and I'm putting out fires as anyone else and doing that. And another thing I've been trying to do recently is be a lot more intentional when I look at my calendar around where that time is going. And so, if I think it's important and I spend 25% of my time on product initiatives and I look at my calendar and it's 5%, what I try and do is figure out why and how do I reorient myself towards the company and how do I reorient how I'm spending time to spend it more wisely, because that would be just, not the best if I wasn't acting that way. So I'm always kind of taking that like macro blanket view of time and saying, how did I really allocate it? Where did it really go? And of course, a lot is going to be on communications, a lot is going to be on hiring, a lot is going to be on all that stuff. But just I'm always trying to rebalance it a little bit.
Yeah, great. And you've talked about Squarespace democratizing design. Design is very important. You have a very elegant site, very elegant set of templates when people create Squarespace sites. I mean, they look great.
Thank you.
And these are amateurs creating sites oftentimes. So we have a number of designers here and UX folks. What's your philosophy on great product design or great visual design?
That's hard. I'm not sure I have like one overarching philosophy. I think one of the things that Squarespace does really well is that we balance the UX and product design of it with the artistic design elements that are, when you say like, the product's beautiful, it looks really great. I think a lot of people are usually talking about the art side of it. And then the back end side of it, where it's like, you're using the product, you're using our interface, you're using our page builder. There's a lot of UX there too, but we do blend artistic elements to it. And so I really like the balance that we've achieved there, and that we always try and keep those artistic roots within the more functional UX oriented design that we do. So I think we're pretty special in that regard.
Okay, great. So let's talk about your customer base a little bit. You've had a wide range of customers from bigger companies, small businesses, but also a number of celebrities that use the platform, folks like Keanu Reeves, Leon Bridges. So can you talk about what it's like to have some of these various folks using the platform? Any good stories?
Well, I mean, what you mentioned Keanu Reeves was really cool because we had him in the Super Bowl ad. And what was great about that is his motorcycle company was actually a Squarespace customer before we put him in the ad. So that wasn't like some contrived thing that we came up with for the spot. I think the thing I like about what we do is that it really, and you used the word democratize before, it really democratizes access to the web and to design and to selling and all these things. And so you've got some of the biggest companies, the biggest celebrities in the world that are using the exact same tool as something that a kid graduating from art school would use to get online. And honestly, that is the best part. I mean, like, of course, it feels cool to see like Keanu Reeves or all these celebrities using the product. And there's a zillion of them, and it's always like, wow, like we have this customers channel at work, and we're always looking at who's on the platform. But really, I think the more touching stories are the ones where it's people who are using the product, that same product that those celebrities are using to reinvent their life and put their idea online and start a business or get a job. And I think that those are the ones that continue to kind of touch me over time, far beyond like the fact that another famous person's using it.
Yeah, and you've started to branch out and help. If it's a small business customer using your site, they can now do a lot more than just host a website. They can get into commerce, other things. Can you talk about the thinking behind expanding into these other services for?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, a lot of it's out of demand. And so, we started with a platform that people make a blog and a bigger website. And then, of course, people are asking, can I buy a domain, connect that domain with you? And then the next thing they want to do is sell things online and maybe book an appointment. And then they need to promote themselves. And so, so a lot of what we are doing is just following that customer journey and trying to provide them with more and more in one ecosystem. And really, also, as we kind of address those different needs, help them keep their brand consistent across all those touch points and integrate those systems. Because if you're a small business and you have a website out there and you're selling things, and maybe using a separate product to track what's being sold, or a separate product for analytics, or a separate product for email marketing, you've got to keep your brand consistent throughout all those touch points, and that's generally really hard for small businesses to do. So we're really just, again, a lot of what we do goes back to those two founding principles, which is just being really conscious around design and brand and helping our customers with that, but then also being an all-in-one platform that's completely integrated so that everything is really seamless for people.
Got it. And in terms of your own personal development and growth as a CEO and a founder, you have an engineering background, you have a product background, design background. As you scaled the company, what have you had to develop? What types of skills and abilities have you had to develop as your leadership role has changed?
All of them. So, I feel like for me, I've been doing this for a while, and I feel like everything that one could have gotten wrong at some point in the company is, I've probably done at some point in the past. And so I think the key there is to know that, of course, you're going to make mistakes. And so a lot of it is, becomes around self-awareness. And are you creating an environment where you're open to at least hearing that you've made a mistake, or are you searching for that? Or are you creating a situation where you don't want people to say that to you, and inevitably that things blow up in that, and you get surprised? And I don't like surprises at this point in my life anymore. Only good ones, maybe.
Good surprises, positive surprises.
But I think just developing a self-awareness and an understanding that you're going to make mistakes and you just need to correct them once you've understood what they are. Is been really big. I mean, that just falls into the whole people management side of things. I don't think anyone starts in life as good at. I don't know of anyone who starts in life as just naturally some fantastic people manager. And so I think that's one of those things you just have to learn by trial and error and making those mistakes. But again, being self-aware and trying to say, I got this one right, I got this one wrong, and I won't do that again. I'll do this again.
When you look at the first stage of the company's growth, is there a particular mistake that stands out? When you reflect back, is there something you would have done differently that you maybe second guessed?
The funny thing about our beginning is that I actually waited a long time to hire people, which is both great and terrible, because it's great because we were always operating in cash flow break even. So at the time when I started to finally hire people, we really had the cash to be able to do it. I didn't have to raise external money to do that. But I probably waited too long on that one. And I think that, one of the lessons of the past years is basically that the stuff that makes you successful in one stage in the company doesn't make you successful in the next. And, I was an okay engineer and a good designer. I got all these things off the ground. And when it came to hiring, I thought I could just program my way out of it. And you really can't. And it took me a long time to build up a better support structure around me, probably too long. And so there were pros and cons in that whole thing, but it took me a while. And then I think that anyone that I've ever spoken to who's done kind of the stuff I've done, inevitably makes mistakes with hiring the people around them. And look, we've messed that up before, but we've also gotten that really right before. There's a lot of people who've been at Squarespace for a long time, and they're always growing and evolving. I'm always growing and evolving, and that DNA, that core of the company, is just so important to retain. So yeah.
And in terms of hiring, as you built out the team and scaled the team, is there something that you've looked for in particular from candidates that you want to see that you think will make them successful at Squarespace?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think a high degree of curiosity, a high degree of emotional intelligence, good communication skills, an appreciation for multiple disciplines, and how those are going to come together to create a great result. Because nothing we do is the result of one single discipline. And even if you look at all those disciplines that I was saying were inherent to the culture, none of it works without great customer operations. None of it works without a great customer experience. So you got to really appreciate how all those things come together. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go back and talk about the business side. So you've made a number of acquisitions over the last couple of years to basically bolster the product capabilities. Can you talk about why you decided to acquire versus, say, build organically? And as you've acquired these companies, how have you integrated them into your company, into your culture?
Yeah, so the acquisitions are actually something that's incredibly new for us. We didn't buy any companies until this year. And we bought 3. 2 were more public-facing. One is a company called Acuity, which is a scheduling engine that people use to book appointments. A lot of our customers use them already. And another is a small, newer company called Unfold. And Unfold helps people make better stories on Instagram. So it's templates for stories on Instagram. You can also use it on, I usually think of Instagram, but you can use it on Snapchat and everywhere else. And, you know, I wonder what it is exactly, what was the turning point in me kind of realizing that this could be something really good for us. I think it was just spending time with the founders and realizing that not everyone wants to go and build out every single thing that's required to make a large company. And sometimes it's a better story and a better path forward to work collaboratively on getting an idea together and, you know, not worry about all the intricacies of marketing, HR, and legal, and, you know, all these things. And so it's kind of just a pleasure for me to be able to join forces with what I consider such great founders who've made really great companies. And, you know, I see it as part of my job to kind of protect them within the larger organization and, you know, make sure they can retain agility and take the good parts of the big company without, you know, being hit by all the parts of it that are going to really slow them down.
Great. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 more questions, and we're going to open up the audience to ask questions. So be thinking about your questions. Let's talk about Google now. So you've been a G Suite customer. I think you founded the company before G Suite existed. So you were on some legacy solution before that. But you came to your senses and migrated to G Suite as soon as it was launched.
Very quickly came to my senses. It was obvious.
So what has that meant to you, your company, and how your company operates? Are there any particular products that stand out, or ways you use the tools that are valuable?
I honestly wasn't kidding that I use Google Sheets. I use Google. I call it Google Apps because it's older, but G Suite. We use it every day. I personally use Google Sheets to manage my whole life. I'm like a getting things done type fanatic person. I put the sheets in this very particular format. And honestly, you can run a pretty big company off G Suites or Google Sheets. I'm proof. We use other tools, of course, as well. But like, it has just been an amazing productivity tool to not have documents go out of, you know, version, and to be able to roll back and to collaborate. I mean, it's just really been fantastic. So I use it every day. I use Gmail or whatever you call it within Google Suite or G Suite. Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, we're mostly standardized on it completely. And again, it's what we resell to our customers because we wanted to give them the same thing we use. And I think we're one of your biggest resellers. Yeah,
a very valuable reseller partner. And I think you, as we talked earlier, you know, you're at that point of inception for new companies where they're trying to get their domain and their website.
They're just getting started.
And they get their G Suite account. So appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Last topic.
Are you going to show me some like up and coming Google Sheets stuff that nobody?
We can go downstairs later.
I'll sign an NDA.
Google Sheets is developed in this office.
What floor?
So, yeah. 6th floor. So we'll maybe take you by later.
All right.
So last part of it, let's talk about a little bit about just marketing and awareness and building the Squarespace brand.
Yeah.
And so you've done a number of creative things. Everything you mentioned earlier, the Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
You're doing something more recently with Sesame Street. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So you know, I mentioned my background in engineering and design, and also we have a really strong marketing team at Squarespace. We've done, as I was saying, with AdWords, we've done paid marketing since Squarespace started, and now we do marketing across every different channel you can imagine, from AdWords to podcasts to Instagram to television to everything. And one of the things that has been a real pleasure is that about 8 years ago, I've always put creatives at the executive level in Squarespace, and about 8 years ago, we hired our first big chief creative officer, guy who's worked with us for a while, David Lee, and we started to really work on campaigns that were more brand campaigns, and started with one called Create Your Own Space, and then, we had one called Build It Beautiful, and it's kind of going on and on. We've had Super Bowl ads, and that's all been really fun. And recently, we got to do a campaign spot with Sesame Street, which is great. I think it's kind of a fresh take on things. It's pretty unexpected. It's cute. It feels good, and it was a real fun one. So if you guys are interested, it's on our YouTube channel. Just an extended spot. Yeah, great. And it's an easy idea. It's just around Oscar de Grouch becoming famous for his trash art because he put it on a website.
You've also done 5 Super Bowl commercials.
Yeah.
So I assume those work. If you're keen to do them. Tell us about the thinking there. I mean, that's kind of the big moment there. Is it?
Yeah. Look, I think the thing to think about with the Super Bowl is a couple things. One, I think it's the only time in America where people actually want to see advertising, which helps the ad retention. So there's that. Two, as a company that has creative at our core, it lets us kind of do creative things at a different level than we would normally do during like kind of the normal spots that run during New Year. We get to do something more avant-garde because people are paying attention to it. You know, you can do a different kind of message there than if we would have, just be on normal broadcast. And it's just got a massive audience. It's a really strange event that everyone comes together to watch ads once a year, and football too. And so I think, look, in the early years, we did see, we're under no illusion that people are going to like stop drinking during the Super Bowl and like go sign up for a website. So it's not about tracking like the in the moment.
But do you see a bump there?
Oh, we see a bump.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the, not in sign up, but like in, definitely in traffic to the site at that moment of anything we do. You clearly see a traffic spike, and we host websites. So it's pretty amazing to see more traffic going there than like all of the other sites combined, which is crazy. It's just, people, it's just a sign that people saw it and they're going, what is that? What is, show me more, tell me more. And the trick for us in advertising a lot is that, look, I mean, people don't start websites that often in their life. They're not, people don't start businesses that often. They're not, putting their portfolio online. They're not getting married and starting, well, hopefully they're not getting married and starting that many wedding websites, but I don't know. It's not the business model. But like so we have to be top of mind when one of those moments occurs where you're ready to go and put your idea online, no matter what that is. And so, we have seen a shift over time of people coming from, basically Googling for things like, how do I build a website, to now in a more mature market, people searching for us by name or our competitor by name. So it's just another way, the brand campaigns are just another way we stay top of mind, and we also can emit some of our values to people so that they get a feeling for what Squarespace is like, that it's artistic and it's going to help them, and like all these things that are kind of inherent in the ads.
Got it. Last question for you is about the future. Mm-hmm. And so you've been working in the internet space for since 2003. It's changed quite a bit. Mm-hmm. What do you see as far as going forward? How businesses and people represent themselves online. How do you see that changing going forward?
Yeah. So, we're more than half as old as the web. So we've been in a position to see it change over time. And so, when I launched it early on, I had to explain to people what a blog was. They didn't know what that was. And so that meant DIY publishing. Then we entered another era around, as the browsers evolved and as bandwidth improved, and the iPhone came out, around web pages that were just much more expressive. It's almost this like portfolio era of websites where Squarespace really, obviously, really took off because we invested in that design. We invested in the most forward-thinking designs on the web. I think that right now you're seeing, as that kind of all-in-one promise continues to evolve with us and our competitors, just more expectations growing from the web platforms. People expect to be able to sell, book appointments, keep their brand consistent in one place. They expect more from that platform, and as they should. I mean, Squarespace has now been around for 15 years. It's a very sophisticated product that can do a lot of different things. And I just think we're entering into a bit of an era of where commerce is important on the web. We're seeing a lot happening with direct-to-consumer brands. It's exciting to see all of those pop up and evolve, and platforms support them. And I think just having a web presence is more important than ever for people who are trying to stand out. But just realizing that the form that presence is taking is different than it was 15 years ago, and it'll be different in 5 years from now, which is why it's so important that we continue to reinvent ourselves and stay modern, and experiment with new things like Instagram stories or email marketing or everything we do.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, it's still surprising. 2019, there's a large percentage of businesses that don't have any sort of web presence or website.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. I mean, there's obviously, some businesses that just probably don't need one. I mean, does the local, bodega downstairs need a website? Probably not. That's not how they're attracting customers. It's just not important to them. I actually think there's an interesting thing that happens, and it's come from some of our research, whereas, and I'm like literally saying one of our campaign lines right now, so just excuse me, but like, the website's a serious step. It makes it real. It means that you're doing something serious, and I think that sometimes people are a little bit afraid to take that step if they have a side project or a hustle that they're doing, and they're just it's nerve-wracking to put your ideas out there, to put a business out there, and you're going to be judged, and you don't want it to fail, and so it's like to go over that line is sometimes like, am I ready? But I think a lot of people will end up getting there, and a lot of them will be successful, and a lot of them use Squarespace, so that's great.
Great. Okay, well, we want to take questions from the audience, so we have mics over here and mics over here, so feel free to line up. We'll start over here.
Hi, thanks for coming. That was a great talk. So I see Squarespace as something like self-service marketing to help brands get out there.
Yeah.
Have you seen demand from your customers for self-service, like mobile app production?
That came up.
Do you think that
Yeah.
they might have like app fatigue?
So we had more of a discussion around that, I would say 4 or 5 years ago. And you actually did see some small startups in our space literally creating mobile apps. I've always had and we considered it. I've just always had the impression that for most of our companies or most of our businesses, they really shouldn't make an app for themselves, because it's just a big heavyweight thing to install that app and maintain it and do all this. And it's kind of better to just have the website where you have like a link and you can share the link. And like, I don't think it makes sense for a lot of small businesses. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't install that many apps in a given month or year. I kind of tend to delete them. And I certainly want to have an app for as much as I love them, every small brand I interact with. I just don't need that. So we've kind of been anti it, even though we saw a little bit of demand for it flaring up a couple years ago. Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
You said you waited probably too long to start hiring.
Mm-hmm.
When you did start hiring, how did you recruit amazing talent?
Well, I think that took a long time. I think that I didn't come from, so when I moved to New York, I didn't have any kind of network here. And so I was sort of like meeting customers and things like that, and just kind of figuring out, who was there that would even kind of work with me, because it's a little nerve-wracking in a way, right? I mean, I was, in my mid-20s, had this project essentially that's running along. Yeah, it's making a lot of money, but like, I don't know, like, you could work here at Google. Why would you work with Anthony in his 20s and just like play? I don't know. Like, so, so a lot of that, I mean.
That's not a very good sales pitch.
Yeah. It's been a while. You definitely want to work with Anthony now. But we have a great place to work. We actually have an amazing place to work with great engineering culture. But back then, there was no culture because it was just me. So, no, I think you got to be really, really scrappy. I think that unless you're lucky enough to come from a network or have ex-coworkers who you trust that can work with you, it was just about trying to prove out as much as I could by myself and just try and prove the next step of growth, I mean, there's a lot going for Squarespace back then, even though it didn't have, a lot of the trappings of what a safe environment would have been. I mean, we were always making money, cash flow break even, showing good traction, had a real product there. Like, that was good stuff. What's missing is boards, mature leaders, executive team, HR, it's startup stuff. It's really, really, really hard. You have to be scrappy, and you're going to have to accept compromises because, I'll also say this, different kinds of personalities make sense at companies at different times. So for instance, we didn't have great engineering management for a long time because there's no engineers to manage. And so, over time, as we hit a breaking point and I basically made every possible mistake there was, we ended up hiring a great, engineering leader. He's actually here, John Colton. He's been at Squarespace for a while. And he immediately corrected all the silly things I was doing with engineering management, and then we were in a much more stable place. But like, somebody like that wouldn't have anything to do when it's just me in a room coding, right? It's just, there's no engineers to manage. So I think you always have to be aware of what's breaking in the culture and what personalities would be happy to help you solve those problems. And similarly, there are people who like the culture when it's 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, and hate it when it's 500. And you're either finding a place for them as the company evolves, because I'm a big fan of trying to fit people into the new structure and to make accommodations so they're not defeated by that. But at the same time, not everyone likes it. Some people want to be in a smaller thing. So,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
Let's go over here.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to ask a slightly self-serving question because I just transferred onto Google Cloud a couple months ago, and I'm just wondering in terms of like scaling and so forth. From that point of view, are you using cloud, ours or somebody else's, and what are your thoughts about that? If you
So we are so old that I ended up. So I set up the original data centers myself. Actually, one was here on at a company called Pier 1 on Wall Street, and installed the service. And so we were actually very good at managing our own on-premise equipment and data centers for a while. And so it's actually like highly cost effective for us in a number of different things. We are starting to look at, we have moved some subsystems to the cloud. We've moved storage almost completely there, stuff that we really shouldn't be managing on site. Yeah, so I think we're opportunistically looking at it and just saying like, this one makes sense. This one we do really well. We shouldn't do it. This one we need to migrate, and we'll get there over time.
Over here.
Right.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi.
I created my personal site on Squarespace.
Love it.
Back in 2014, and I've been using it ever since.
Great.
The question I have for you is, when you were a solo founder, you had a good amount of control over your product, the vision, and now that you have over 1,000 people, you've got a lot more voices and a lot more people to delegate over. How do you balance your vision, your drive, your need, your desire for control over how this product should be, and the needs of the people that are on your team and their vision for your product?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, and something I've, as you might imagine, struggled with over time. I think that right now, one of the best things that happens to me is that with very little of my own anything, the teams end up collaborating with each other and coming up with something amazing that balances all those kind of core disciplines that I think make Squarespace special and adheres to the design principles, the engineering principles, and everything, and brings something together that is almost like a feels like a final product almost. And then I'm, at the end, maybe adjusting it by a small amount or giving some advice. And it's just like, that's a pleasure for me when that happens. And that is very hands-off, right? I mean, I am not saying or doing much of anything. And so, I just see my role sometimes as more of a protector of the kind of people who want to produce things at that level versus, I have to go in there and say like where every little thing is. Now, I'm a crazy founder, so I'm of course going to go in and like adjust a margin or something every once in a while or say something nuts. But that's just like what's going to, that's just the balance we're going to have. And hopefully I do that in the right form, only 10% of the time. And, most of it is around letting the culture produce just great things. Because, I mean, at some point, like, it's not about me. I'm not making the stuff anymore. Other people are making the stuff. And it's about me protecting those people, protecting that culture, and helping them get that out to everybody and get that to our customers. So, again, I'm of two minds. I'll adjust a margin, and then the best day is when I didn't do anything. So,
Nice. Thank you.
All right, time for one more question over here.
yeah.
Thank you for coming. As a company that's focused on both design and ease of use, how do you make decisions around how much control to give customers, specifically around design and parameterization of different parts? And are there times where what customers are asking for differs from what, say, designers think you should be giving them, like how much control you should be giving customers?
Another fantastic question. We have historically been pretty opinionated around the design systems that we put in place. The Squarespace that you see on the web right now is based on a framework called Squarespace 6, came out a couple years ago, evolved to Squarespace 7. And it gives a lot of control to our designers who put out essentially archetypes and let people operate within those archetypes. And there's all kinds of rules and boundaries that are often invisible to the customer that by just interacting with one of our templates, they're kind of staying within. And that's why you're getting hopefully a better aesthetic result than if we just gave them a blank piece of paper and said, you draw it, right? So we want them to adopt those best practices, but there's a constant tension there between, you know, what they want to do expressibility-wise and what we have. But I think that one of the things we're trying to do in like the next generation of our design system is to say, hey, we want you to be able to make, we want you to be able to make any kind of website, but like we get a list of like 100 that we really like, and we try and make sure that the archetypes and the components that we put together help people get to those results really, really fast. Because there's a lot of design choices that you could make that are probably not what you meant or not what you wanted, that are just not good end games. And so, yeah, if you want utter and total complete control, you know, we have a dev platform, you can always code it out yourself. But for most people, we're trying to boil things down into particular archetypes and a particular design system that means that they're rapidly able to achieve great results. So there is a tension there, but I think a lot of people end up pretty happy with where we can end up getting them. So,
Great.
Thanks.
With that, we'll wrap it up. I want to thank Anthony again for coming today, sharing your story.
Thank you all. And thank you for G Suite.
And thank you for being a Google Cloud customer and partner. And congratulations. It's pretty phenomenal success you've achieved with Squarespace. So
Thank you. I'll see you all on floor 6.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.